So today we're going to talk a little bit about data and how to turn data into intelligence. So I think we have a great panel here of colleagues that understand data and how to use it. It's all, data's always been a vital part to decision making. And clearly we have, as you've heard over the last 2 days, no shortage of data within our industry. So what we're really going to talk about is how you take that data and do something useful with it. So I'll give each of you guys a couple minutes, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you need to talk about it, but I have a specific question for each of you. You can deal with those. That'd be great. So Yudong, can you just highlight to us how technology plays a role in turning data into an actionable intelligence?
Yeah, definitely. In Ctrip, we have a lot of data. I would say most of the Ctrip products are built on top of data. We have a lot of data from external sources, and also we have a lot of data generated by Ctrip users. So take flight as an example. We got ATPCO data. We built our pricing engine using ATPCO data, and also we have direct connections with the airlines. We also get a lot of contents from GDS or consolidators. Because we have such a variety of data, we are very flexible to create a lot of new products. It is those products may not exist in any of those sources. For example, we can create like interlining by combining LCCs and LCCs, LCC and full service and full service, without following any like ATPCO rules. Those new products can provide better price, better coverage, and eventually provide more value for our users. So Ctrip's goal is to build a one-stop shop for travelers. So we do not only provide flights just for transportation. Currently, we can like combine flights with other transportation methods, like combine flights with train and flights plus bus plus car, or even flight plus ferry in some areas. All of these things are based on huge amount of data. And also, furthermore, we can use our flight data and also the data from other product lines, combine them together, and then provide better ancillary products and do more cross-sell. So currently, we use the flight as a portal of traffic. So we bring traffic to hotel business. We bring traffic to other ancillary products like insurance, coupon, or even gifts, restaurants. We try to bundle all of these things together to provide better products to users. But of course, in order to do that better, we need to analyze users' behavior to understand the user's intent. In that sense, the user's behavior data is very valuable to us. So we spend a lot of effort to understand the user's behavior so that we can make good recommendations to users. We can recommend better ancillary products while the user is purchasing flight ticket on our website. So, and also we use user behavior data in a lot of other areas, like we do a risk control. We also use the user behavior data to do better revenue management. In all of those areas, we need to depend on our data.
Thanks, Yudong. Hassan, so can you speak maybe more specifically about ATPCO data and how that helps you and your customers?
Sure. I guess just during lunchtime we were meeting with David, and we had a back-in-time moment to 2009, 2010, when ATPCO was launching the IATA tax product, and we worked with ATPCO on that product for almost a year before it made it to the industry. So we're big proponents of ATPCO as a method to standardize and distribute data. And I think we all talk about data in the industry, but something as basic as location codes is not standardized yet. There are two versions within IATA, and there is a version within ATPCO with mapping. And I'm sure every single system provider here maintains their own manual tables. So through time, what we've worked with ATPCO is to push more and more of that manual data to be fully automated, and also to think about data in kind of three ways. One is it's standardized, and everybody interprets it the same way. The other thing is it scales. We've had some on and off with the NDC standards, but I'm sure that all the systems providers here, the moment you start doing offer integrity and you have shopping volumes, let's say the US market or the Chinese market or the European market, and you try to store all the offers and then validate was that the offer that they sent out to the customer, that will never work out. So you have to find ways to ensure offer integrity at scale. Same thing with the NDC standards. The XML, if you try to push what the carrier said here yesterday, if we try to push a menu of 1,000 options, let's say 100 flights, 10 different brand combinations on each flight, and you try to receive that through the NDC XML today, it will take 5 minutes for the customer's browser to parse that and display that. So whenever we think about data, we have to think about how data scales. And that's true of fares, that's true of dynamic pricing. So if we try to do dynamic pricing using filed fare levels, which is what I think some people are thinking about, or if we try to do continuous pricing using off-ATPCO fare determination, I can tell you 5 reasons why that wouldn't work. And going back to the experts, that's kind of the curse of the experts, so you can see why it doesn't work. It wouldn't work because if you have to do reprice and do historical fare levels to a completely different destination, then that dynamic pricing system needs to give you that price level or what that price level would have been at that point, for example. It wouldn't work because the price is not just a price point, it's a contract. It's a legal contract between the airline and the customer, which communicates a bunch of rules about that contract, which you need to be able to reference. Some governments need you to report that into the government. So we've had dynamic pricing going for almost 2 years. We've had to do it through ATPCO data. And the way we did it through ATPCO data is we kind of hacked our way into the data, so to speak, and used either unused capabilities or smarter ways of doing things. Similarly, there is a way right now in ATPCO to retail bundles more than the atoms of the universe, right? You can specify trillions of bundles in ATPCO if you use the account code facility, 20 alphanumeric. You just have to find a way to basically align that all the way through the product stack, through the fare stack, through the YKYR stack, through the IATA tax stack, through the baggage product, through all the ancillary products and all of that. So if you are a marketer and you want to create dynamically a bundle, you can essentially assemble it, and that can still stay filed in ATPCO as a catalog, and then you can have the decision-making system on the back end making those decisions in real time, but you have record of all the elements, and you can recreate it for servicing. You can recreate it, pushing it through the back-end systems. If you have partner that's doing the check-in for you in some off-airport where you don't have your own staff, they can do reprise, they can service that ticket because it's a standard ticket using standard messaging, using standard processing. So you can have NDC tomorrow without having to refile everything if you just file it in a smart way and price and shop it in the right way.
Thanks. So Henry, you know, Sam just talked about standards, and your title is Head Airline Distribution Standards at IATA. You know the question, right? Can you talk to us about data standards?
I can indeed. I guess for me, the standard or standardization is kind of the difference between a whole lot of raw data and data that's usable and kind of drives outcomes. And we have this funny situation in the industry, and IATA is probably just as much to blame as anyone, where over time we've developed all these different data exchange processes, and each of them now kind of involve a body of data. But because they've all been developed at different times, we end up talking about the same data with two different names or two different types of data with the same name, and it confuses everyone, but it also involves a whole lot of resource and cost for airlines to try and sort of sort it out and build data warehouses and that type of thing. So we're kind of very aware of this problem, and something that IATA is working on is the airline industry data model. And that's something we're building at an industry level to sort of become a repository of data definitions and business concepts and that type of thing. We're starting to use that model to push out standards, so the NDC and the One Order standards are being developed within that model, and that kind of gives us a whole lot of alignment so that data coming into systems kind of lines up with data that's going out, and people understand what's happening. What the data model also gives is the opportunity for airlines to take a snapshot of that and have a kind of consistent view of how data is described and how terminology is used to kind of drive their own business intelligence processes also. So we're working very closely with ATPCO on the data model. There's discussions happening at the moment about bringing kind of the fair and rule data into that framework. And I think we've had a lot of discussion this week about new capabilities, new processes, new data sources. And if we continue to kind of build that industry framework and that standardization, we really get value out of those new data sources.
Excellent. Thanks. So Chuck, you at ARC, you deal a lot with what's happened yesterday, sales and so forth. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you guys help with data moving forward, predictive?
Absolutely, Graham. One of the things, and you mentioned this earlier, we're going to talk a little bit about data. We could talk about data for hours, but we're not going to do that. The encouraging thing I've seen at the conference so far has been most of the presentations and most of the discussions have been sort of centered on the data. What's going on? How do we find out what's happening? That sort of thing. For several years now, in partnership with IATA, we've been collecting airline tickets. We obviously get all the tickets from U.S. travel agencies at ARC. We get most of the BSP data from IATA, and we've got, as of today, 90 airlines that are sending us their ticketing data on a daily basis. So we're sitting on a lot of data, but looking back and seeing what happened yesterday or what have the trends been over the past several years is interesting and helpful, but it's yesterday's news. So taking a look at that and really being able to project and forecast and apply some predictive analytics models into what is going to happen tomorrow is really the core advantage that is available today. And the key thing that we've been looking at on the predictive analytics side is forecasting is not something new. Revenue management guys have been forecasting for 20 years or more. We are forecasting, kind of running through models and saying what's going to happen next. A lot of the predictive analytics tools that are out there and are fed with a lot of this data are adjusting as things change. So it's not just a one-and-done forecast. The ability to change that model and change that forecast as the data changes and as you learn more is going to be really, really critical going forward. And the tools that are available to do that are accelerating very, very rapidly. Many of the airlines in this room use tools and they have some expertise, but I would encourage you to sort of focus on that expertise. What is your objective? What are you trying to do? Instead of trying to build tools or build algorithms or that sort of thing. Those are available in a lot of the new technology platforms that are out there. Understand really what your objective is. Not just what the question is, but what is your objective? What are you trying to do? Are you maximize revenue? Are you maximizing yield? Are you going to maximize load factor? All of these things are good, but in combination and looking at where those models are going to send your airline is really the ultimate key to the predictive analytics that we can use going forward.
Excellent points. Yeah, really good. Okay, good. So I have a question that's probably going to be directed at you two guys more so, and that's really around, so today they have so many different sources of data, and you guys combine it in order to get to the responses and things you need to do. So what are the challenges in ensuring you're getting the right data at the right time and being able to use it from the right source? Start with you, Don.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think this is a good question. Actually, the right data. What's the right data? I don't know. That's a big.
That goes back to Chuck's point, right? So what are you trying to do? What's the data they get there?
Right. For us, actually, there are many problems in when we process the data. Just want to point out two things. One is data format. So ATPCO provide very well structured data, but even though it is not easy to process those data, first we need to understand data. Second, even in ATPCO data, there are some irregularities. For example, the refund and change policy in category 16. So we have to use like natural language processing techniques to understand those data, and then to structure those data ourselves so that we can automate the post booking services. That's one. We need to spend a lot of effort to format data, to structure data. Second, the accuracy of the data, especially the price and the availability. As compared to availability, probably price does not change frequently, but availability is a big issue for us. Anyway, I think there's no silver bullet for all these problems. We have to invest heavily and continuously on technology. We build a pretty big data processing team, data scientist team, and also we invest on our data center technologies. Currently, we also try to migrate our systems to cloud, so we have more flexibility in get more computing power. So that is what I think. In the end, we need to believe in technology. We need to use the technology to process data and then provide better products to our users.
Thanks. Same question.
I mentioned some of the problems around standardization, and sorry about the IATA, but ATPCO was much better at actually standardizing data, and we've been trying to move data out of IATA and into ATPCO to the maximum extent possible. But I don't think that's the biggest problem. I think the biggest problem that people coming out of the industry don't appreciate, and I think all the people in this room appreciate, is that airline is a networked business. Except for the pure LCC airlines, most airlines have to work with partner airlines. So the biggest problem with data is, how do you speak a language that your partners understand? And how can they speak a language that you will understand? And understanding is not just in the pricing, shopping, the front end of the process. Then there is the whole layer of back office systems. There's the whole layer of service. And a lot of airlines are serviced either through airport handling companies or through their partner companies. And each of those people and each of those points needs to understand what you sold to the customer. Otherwise, they would not be able to service that customer. And then on the back end, we come to ARC and making sure that all the money gets split up properly. And then on top of that, you're going to see a lot more. Airlines is a touch business. 30% of the tickets get touched, either by regular operations or because the customers want to change them, which means that you need to know exactly what you sold, have the full record of what happened between the time you sold it and when you need to touch it, and then know the rules that you sold to the customer about what you can do about that touch. So in a sense, what we had to create essentially is, in the order, you have to keep the full history of who did what to that order in order to be able to properly change it and then keep it all the way through and after it has been fulfilled, which is very different from the other businesses. So I think that when we think about data, we have to think about not only the airline as a silo or each system as a silo, but how will that get communicated to all the partners. And quite frankly, that's why I didn't believe in NDC when it came out initially. I didn't think it would happen because that's a massive coordinated investment of the industry. I think that the way we are seeing NDC happen today, we'll see a lot more of NDC flowing through the traditional data exchange channels. things like Edifact, things like SSRs, things like essentially e-ticketing and EMD and all of that, especially when you're dealing with interline situations. And yes, there will be airline-specific NDC offer order management systems, but it's not as controlled an environment as even on the airline website. I'll challenge everybody in the room when they think about the data and how they want to market and create offers to think about the whole process, beginning to end, and the interchangeability with the partners. And quite frankly, that's how we make our money, right? We solve that complexity for the marketing department and everybody else along the way without disturbing the rest of the processes.
Yeah, I would build on that a little bit. As you were saying, Graham, there's a whole lot of data sources out there. What you do with the data and what you bring together, that sort of thing. The what is very important, but even more important is the why. And the why could be at a very micro level. It's something Joelle was saying when she was up here. If you know that a passenger has had mishandled bags on 3 of the last 4 flights, that's a good thing to know, because that is a passenger at risk of moving to another airline. So knowing those kind of things, understanding the why behind what is in the data, those are macro or micro trends. Looking at macro trends, you could see something like, why are fares generally going up, generally going down? There could be GDP reasons, there could be fuel price reasons, there could be a lot of things. So if you don't look at the why in the data, you could make assumptions that your product is wrong, your schedules are wrong, that sort of thing, where it could be some external factor that's driving a lot of that change. So in your question about which data do you need to get to, what data should you look at, it really depends on what's affecting the trends.
Yeah, good point.
Understand why things are happening, and that gets into which data you want to select and where you want to spend your time, because we've all got 168 hours in a week.
Be a good point. So I'm going to let you guys look in the crystal ball a little bit and look forward. So in a future state, you've heard lots of conversation around dynamic pricing and personalization, and I think the jury's out that data is going to increase, probably astronomically. So if you were now on a stage and the moderator was giving you the opportunity to give advice to people, what would you guys say to the audience to make sure that data is still available, consumable, and actionable? And we'll start with Henry, because you've been quiet a little while now, so go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on some of these points, I think it's really important that airlines have a really clear strategy with data. It's kind of the why and the what I'm looking for. And it's got to line up with where you'd like your commercial organization to be. So that's the starting point. Where would you like your commercial processes to be in 5 or 10 years' time? What data are you going to require to fuel those processes? That has to be part of a roadmap. What does the input data look like? But what does the output data look like as well? And how comfortable are you with sharing that? And we've had discussions this week around kind of how we do things better together, and when ATPCO, ARC, and IATA can kind of act as a neutral source. And that needs to be part of a data strategy also. So I'd certainly just encourage everyone to kind of take that away. Certainly also with the increase in kind of processing capacity and storage capacity, the amount of rich data we can play with just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I think Chuck kind of mentioned there's a shift in how we play with that data. We've looked at things like artificial intelligence, neural networks. Those are very different ways of processing data to the kind of activities we do today.
Yeah, one of the things, Henry, related to standards, and you mentioned sharing of data, things like that. One of the challenges that we have seen in dealing with some of our airline customers is sort of holding on to that data. So even if the data is publicly available, there are public tariffs, there are publicly available fares you can go to any OTA and find, things like that. So airlines that tend to hold on to that data for sometimes not particularly rational reasons, we'll leave it at that, kind of makes things a little bit more challenging for the whole environment. I won't ask for a show of hands, but for the airlines in the room, which one of you is the smartest and has the most capability to manage an airline? Don't show me your hands, just, Okay, I could tell the ones that set up and they're proud of what they're doing. But the point there is, if you've got a level playing field and you're sharing information, things like that, and you can differentiate your products, your service, and your distribution, you can actually win this game. And that's something that we want to encourage our airlines to think more about, because a lot of this data is out there and it is inefficient for the industry if we're not following up the standards, as you were talking about earlier, and not sharing the information that is available already, but it's just a matter of making it efficient, and then airlines can start to compete and differentiate as they're very capable of doing.
That's it. Do you want to spend the time running your business, or do you want to spend your time trying to mash a whole lot of disparate data sources together? It's a no-brainer.
Huh? Future looking. What do you?
I guess future looking, two trends that I think I can see. One is I think there will be what I call mass personalization. And that's at the core of the NDC desire, I think, of the airlines to know a lot about the channel, the customer, the situation, and customize an offer to that customer. And I think there will be a lot of proprietary secret sauce, so to speak, that each airline would want to invest in AI capabilities, marketing capabilities, a lot of things on how they create that offer. And I don't see that being shared through any sort of standard, because that's exactly how do we create our product. But I think that whole world of data needs to be able to interface into the transaction. Once you've decided that offer, how do you put it out with your customers through the different channels? And then how do you ensure that that transaction is recorded and the full service life of that transaction can be supported by your decisions as a proprietary, creating that proprietary offer. And that's where I think ATPCO is indispensable, and finding clever ways of interfacing that through ATPCO and through the existing channels into the system, because I think we can all agree that even if we look 5 years out or 10 years out, it's unlikely that every single PSS and airline would be rewritten to communicate with every other PSS and airline. So the reality is, at least in the next 10 years, we need to live through the existing interfacing channels with some upgrade. So the proprietary sauce can be very fancy, and it can take all sorts of data and all sorts of data scientist models. And we saw Flyer on the stage earlier today. They're doing very interesting things. But that then needs to be interfaced, communicated, and properly supported through the life cycle of that journey and of that offer. And that's where I think ATPCO standards, traditional messaging, and all the pricing systems and the shopping systems and everybody else can be really helpful in supporting that process and taking that messiness and complexity outside of the airline world.
Doing anything from a Ctrip perspective on future looking?
Yeah, sure. I just want to follow up with what Chuck said. I totally agree with that. We need to share the data, not only between airlines, but also between OTAs and probably across the whole industry. Because as an OTA, the traffic we receive every day is much larger than any airline. Those traffic can reflect the demand of the market. So we can analyze those data and then provide some sort of intelligence to airlines for whatever, for like add or reduce the number of flights or for revenue management. Actually, we are collaborating with some Chinese airlines. We feed our data analysis result to their revenue management system, and the result is very positive. And on the other side, if the airline can understand the market better by using OTS user data, then they can design better products for users, and then we as OTA can provide better products for users. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's really good. So I do have a question from the audience that I think is interesting, but we have 48 seconds left. So your answers are going to have to be right to the point, guys. So it's really around data gaps. And this question specifically calls you guys all out as having data gaps. And it says, what are you going to do about closing them? Maybe we'll start with you, Chuck.
Yeah, that's,
in 12 seconds or less.
in
Yeah.
12 seconds or left. Data gaps will always exist. There are tools, techniques, and ways to do, whether it's sampling methodologies or estimations, things like that, that will allow you to fill those gaps. And a lot of the things that we've talked about throughout the conference on the data science presentations and the visualizations, all that sort of thing, don't get intimidated by that, even if there are gaps in the data. This is not magic. It's just math. And that's something that you can work through, even to fill those gaps.
Henry, gaps?
Yeah, nothing major to add. I think we've got this opportunity now for much kind of bigger and richer data that gives us the opportunity to kind of normalize things a little bit here.
I think in our experience, you can triangulate. So if there is a gap, you can use other pieces of data to find out exactly what happened. Yeah. So that there are many techniques that you can use basically to fill up the gap.
Fill up the gaps. Similar? Nothing to add. Same thing. Okay. Well, thanks. This has been really interesting. Great panel, I think. I'm trying to decipher or explore the importance of turning data into intelligence. Yadong, Issam, Henry, and Chuck, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for listening.